Alika moaned in pain. In fact, it was a serious enough wound to prevent Alika from continuing the battle. Jin sheathed his sword and asked about her well-being. She replied that everything was fine. It's been a while since she's been like this. Jin called Anya to heal Alika's wound. Anya, who came running, immediately began to heal the wound with her healing magic. While Anya was dealing with Alika's wound, Jin thought about his victory. It wasn't an attack that Alika couldn't dodge. He was just lucky. And it was true. Jin hasn't done his best yet. In training with Alika, he often played his last trump cards after the 100-second mark. In other words, Jin always beat Alika in the analysis phase. However, this time not because of his height, but because of the opponent's mistake, so today's victory was not so sweet. Alika had a similar opinion. She was incredibly careless. When the energy of the shadows blocked her view, she thought that Jin would move as usual, so she did not calculate her next step. Alika was dissatisfied with herself. She completely lost her grip after retirement. To think she'd lost before the end of the 6 months she'd promised Jin. Jin told her not to worry too much. They'd better call it a draw. He couldn't accept such a victory. Alika sighed. She knew Jin would say that. She was sorry. With such carelessness, she showed disrespect to Jin. Thanks to Anya's painstaking work, the wound healed in an instant. But they couldn't ignore the obvious. If it had happened 3 months ago, even if she had made a mistake or hesitated, he could not defeat her. The difference is only 3 months. As for Alika, she couldn't believe how quickly Jin was able to increase his capabilities in such a short period of time. Unshakable ambitions, fighting spirit and talent are a killer mix. According to her estimates, Jin will soon reach the 6th rank in both magic and aura. Since she was a former member of Biment's Special Affairs Department, she met many people from famous swordsman families. However, Alika was sure, among all the talented knights she had fought, Jin was on another level. Soon everyone will see it. The 1st of December, 1795. So winter has come to Tikin. The city was covered with snow. Residents of the city together cleared the streets of snow. Jin and Murakin strolled slowly through the city. Murakin had 3 boxes in his hands. Jin asked why he bought so much fruit ice in such a cold. Murakin explained that cold dishes taste better on cold days. The most important reason for the purchase was that his strawberry pie said she wanted ice cream. Jin chuckled. Was Murakin planning to turn Gilly's stomach into ice? Jin saw Kashmir and Julia in front of him. Kashmir asked if he had a minute to talk about work. Julia was left to Murakin. Kashmir began to report everything they had learned about Vishkal Iviliano. Vishkal Iviliano. He was the interim head of Iviliano, and the only talent in the family that was losing ground due to a lack of capable people. Before beginning the explanation, Kashmir clarified whether Jin knew about Kinzelo, a crazy organization that wanted to make its leader the king of the world. In Jin's past life, they killed the king of Jin Kingdom and massacred the people, which really contributed to their fame. Jin nodded. He said that he came across them during a mission when he was a cadet. If Jin knew about them, then the conversation would be short. Kashmir wasn't sure, but it's possible that Vishkal is a member of them. He visits the Principality of Kirano once a week, and every time he looks for a workshop there with the strange name Explosion is Art. Geber Gaston was listed as the owner of the workshop. From what Kashmir has learned, he also directs Kinzello. At the moment, there was a possibility that they had a close relationship, but since they know that Vishkal carries food there, most likely Buber occupies a higher position. In fact, Vishkal was the deputy head of Kinzello, so he held a higher position. However, the 7 colors haven't figured it out yet. Now Jin understood why Vishkal got into their showdown with Gaston during the banquet. It used to seem to him that this was just an extremist group, but since an 8th rank knight was involved in this, then everything was not as simple as it seemed at first glance. At this time, Julia was torturing the dragon. She wanted to play with Jin. While Murakin was trying to calm her down, he hit his head on an icicle. In a rage, he hurled a fragment at Kashmir's head. After that, he blamed Julia for it. A knight of the 8th rank will not suffer from this. So Kashmir only looked at Murakin in puzzlement. Jin asked about the information about the spider-armed Alua. At first, Kashmir thought it would be easier to find a person's name. That finding information about some suspicious gangster leader from the alley was easy with the help of the 7 Colors Intelligence Network. However, even after all this time, they could not find the real name of Alua. He had more secrets than they expected. Although the elite troops of the 7 Colors worked hard, there was no trace of how Aluk became the head of the Tessing family. It seemed that someone had deliberately erased the information about him. That was all they could dig up. Jin thought that maybe he shouldn't have killed Aluk. Then maybe he could find out more information. Jin thanked Kashmir for the hard work. Kashmir said that the informants are really trying. They keep digging under Kinzello. Kashmir will inform you if it receives additional information about Aluha, including. Jin told him that he owed him. Kashmir smiled. He said you shouldn't thank him. If Jin is really grateful to him, then let him play with Julia. Kashmir was afraid that Murakan would take it out on him, so he asked him to play with Julia faster so that she wouldn't get the Great Dragon. Jin replied that he would play with her without any problems, but today it would be somewhat difficult. It's time for sparring. He also asked Kashmir to be present during the sparring. Recently, he began to realize something. Kashmir gladly agreed. He was interested to see Jin's height. Kashmir's expression was filled with confidence. He was sure that Jin couldn't beat Alika yet. Alika was already at the training ground, waiting for Jin. Alika started jokingly complaining when she saw Kashmir walking next to young Rankandel. Kashmir was somewhat surprised. Can't he be here? Alika replied that she could. She just didn't want him to see her defeat. Kashmir's eyes were full of shock. Alika said that today was their last training session. It would be great if Jin remembered her as a good training partner. Jin replied that he would remember her as a great teacher and friend. Kashmir was still shocked. What is it all about? A little more than 3 months have passed, and his wife has already talked about defeat. While Kashmir lost his sense of reality, Jin and Alika took their positions. Kashmir pulled himself together and walked away from the battlefield. He didn't want to stop them. Alika clenched her fists, and Jin muttered a summoning spell. Phoenix, a summoned beast from another world, an entity that only magicians of the 6th rank and above can summon. It wasn't just his swordsmanship that had improved over the past few days of fighting. His shadow energy and magic were also greatly enhanced. Jin created an interdimensional portal, and a huge flaming bird appeared from it. The phoenix blazed with majestic blue fire. At the 6th rank, magicians get the opportunity to sign contracts with assistants, but no one knows who will fall to them by the will of fate. Since magicians can only open spatial gates to the world of fire, the choice fell on this bird. That's why magicians are desperate to be chosen by a special phoenix, and the rarest of them is the one that summons blue flames. Kashmir looked at Phoenix Jin and sighed. He knew who this phoenix was. Sweat rolled down his face as Kashmir looked at Phoenix Jin. He felt scorching waves of heat every time the mystical phoenix flapped its wings. More than 10,000 phoenixes were registered in the Society of Magicians, but only one of them was characterized by a blue flame. Had Jin signed a contract with Tess? Kashmir was too shocked by this. Jin summoned Tess, a beast that was considered the noblest phoenix. Those who managed to summon Tess became the greatest magicians of their time. Jin bared his bradamante and started talking about the beginning of the fight. A white aura surrounded her 2 fists, and she shot forward like a bullet, instantly closing the gap. In his current state, Jin couldn't follow Alika's movements with hand-eye coordination. He usually anticipated her movements and counterattacked. However, there was no need for that today. Tess was emitting a dark blue flame that touched everything around her, preventing Alika from getting closer. The weakest flame was no lower than the 5th rank. Even for a 7th rank knight with a trained body, without an aura shield, she would have received a 2nd-degree burn. On top of that, Tess's flame had a special ability called pressure. Alika noticed that when she touched the flame, her body became heavier. Because of her, the amount of stamina she loses increases dramatically. She needs to finish the battle quickly. As the name implies, the pressure was exerted on the opponent affected by the Phoenix ability. Tess's flame had a weight that defied all the laws of nature. Hence, the moment it landed on the aura shield, she couldn't ignore it because the flame didn't go out as easily as a normal fire. Because the opponent's body itself has become as heavy as a stone in water. Moving, Alika dodged every attack and took a defensive position. That way, Jin would easily have the upper hand. He can support Tess for another 3 minutes. That was quite enough for the current genie. Although it was just sparring, Jin had always felt the threat of death in recent battles. Now it was Jin's turn to make Alika feel the same way. Without missing a day for the past 3 months, Alika has been training Jin to help him become stronger, and he knew what the best gift to give her. Alika jumped into the air, dodging the flames, and Jin swung his sword in her direction. Jin barely scratched her shoulder with his sword. Then, as soon as she landed and kept her balance, a sphere of mana formed in Jin's left hand. He threw the wind blade at her ankles, and as he expected, she jumped into the air again. Jin prevented her from recovering, gradually exerting pressure. Having fought Alika many times, Jin realized that her attacks are diverse. At the moment, it is almost impossible to predict her actions and react to them. However, among all the many variations, Alika had one thing in common: dominance. She needs to dominate her opponent no matter what. She's probably trying to regain the advantage now. Jin decided to take advantage of this to strike. He filled Bradamante with shadow energy and Jin swung his sword several times, leaving several crescent-shaped streaks in the air. He also used fire magic, which Alika had to dodge. Tess's flame was waiting for her from behind, and Jin was in front with a sword. It wasn't impossible to dodge both attacks, but it would allow Jin to gain an advantage and attack again. Even if she faced injury, she decided that taking over now would be the best choice. She would never have won if she had remained cornered throughout the battle. She needed to interrupt the flow set by Jin. Tess's breath of flame startled Alika. The cone-shaped blue flame seemed to engulf her. However, the flames couldn't penetrate the aura shield she had created. Tess couldn't release anything stronger because the phoenix's power depended on the summoner's mana. As planned, Alika caught Jin's blade. She protected her hand with an aura. However, it wasn't enough to cut off her fingers. To strike, she put her feet on the ground and pulled the sword towards her to pull Jin up. With a booming cry, she struck. She couldn't give it her all because of the shield she raised, but it was enough to make Jin recoil. There should have been a refreshing, clear sound of impact, but his absence made Alika look around. Her fist only hit the air. Instinctively, she looked at the sword she was holding, and there was no one at the end of the pen where the genie should have been. At the other end of the sword, a blue fire burned brightly. After Alika caught the blade, Jin abandoned his sword and changed his position. Instead, he placed a heavy flame on the hilt of the sword, deceiving his opponent. Alika was too busy breathing Tess and didn't notice it. She only noticed it after everything happened. Thus, she reacted too late. Jin appeared from behind and his hand shone green because of the wind magic. She hit her, which caused her to spit blood and fell to the ground. While managing to admit defeat, Jin deactivated the rune of Molt, and then shouted to Kashmir to summon an Ea. Kashmir told Quickhantel and Mirakin that Jin had defeated Alika in battle. He also talked about a phoenix with a blue flame. The two dragons froze in shock and surprise. Mirakin grabbed Kashmir and asked who Jin had summoned. Kashmir pronounced Tess's name. Quickhantel fell to her knees from sudden weakness. At this time, Jin and Alika were chatting. Alika said that she overdid it and used the aura shield to win, but it had the opposite effect. To think that she was defeated by a double attack from behind. She asked when he had planned it all. After the first time, Jin asked if that didn't sound a little arrogant. Alika laughed, accepting complete defeat. Jin thanked her for everything she had done for him. She shook her head. She was having fun too. He has no idea how proud she was of him. Alika asked him to share his feelings about what it feels like to put an employee of the Special Department of Bement on the shoulder blades at the age of 15. Before he could answer, Quickhantel and Mirakin came running. Mirakin told Jin to call Tess. He called Tess without much question. Quickhantel knelt and bowed, shouting greetings. She greeted the Flame Master. Mirakin looked like he had met an old teacher with whom he had a bad relationship. Everyone's stomach turned over from the fantastic sight. During the short time Mirakin and Tess were talking, not a single person could hear Tess's voice. Tess was pecking at Mirakin's head with incredible speed. Surprisingly, the black dragon did not resist and just backed away. The phoenix was saying something while punishing the dragon. The dragon agreed, but the phoenix didn't stop. Mirakin could only ask Tess to stop. Kashmir stood rooted to the spot. He felt a refreshing feeling. He liked how Mirakin was punished. Mirakin shouted for Jin to cancel the call. Jin cancelled the summoning spell. The bird was struggling and throwing a tantrum when it was involuntarily pulled into an interdimensional portal. Jin wondered why the great Mirakin was sucking up to the bird. Mirakin began to explain. It wasn't Tess's real uniform. The real one can be seen only in the realm of fire. There was little information about the other world. All creatures from the alternate dimension have been witnessed in uncontrolled lands such as the Black Sea, which has nurtured many monsters, or through various summoned beasts such as the Phoenix. In his previous life, Jin had never heard of the Kingdom of Fire, despite his extensive knowledge of magic, extensive enough to surpass many professors. Of course, Jin didn't know about the realm of fire. Only dragons and gods called him that. They themselves came up with this name for convenience. But even the highest-ranking gods do not know the real name of this place. She was beyond the power of the gods. The flame god Shenu himself is unable to use the flame of the realm of fire. Mirakin decided to finally get to the point. In the past, several gods have left the realm of fire, including dragons like Quickhantel and him. But some of the gods were getting on Tess's nerves. That day they saw his true power. Enraged, he burned 5 gods and a couple of dragons on the spot. Quickhantel shuddered at these words. She recalled the terrifying nightmare she had experienced when she visited the realm of fire with Mirakin and their respective gods, Ulta and Soldrith. That day, she watched the 5 gods disappear. Jin was thoughtful. If Tess is so powerful, then how strong does one have to be to manifest that power? Mirakin immediately understood what Jin was thinking. He said it was impossible. No matter how strong you are, you won't be able to summon all of his energy. No one is able to use someone else's magic from another world. This is something like a fine. That's why the gods who came to this world were powerless, and Tess himself can't use all the power here. Mirakin also told what Tess wanted. The old man told him to tell him that he liked Jin very much. Mirakin congratulated him. Well, even if Tess's powers weren't that overwhelming, Jin was fine with that, judging from what he saw in the textbooks. And the best part is that their fire couldn't control the tire. A full-scale war was inevitable between the Rankandels and the Zippels, and if Jin had fought Kellark, Tess's strength would have helped a lot. Regardless of the level, ordinary fire spells will never be effective against Kellark, a contract of the fire god Shinu. January 1, 1796. The new year has come. On the first day of the new year, the family gathered together and prayed for a safe year. Fostering love with family, loved ones and friends would be wonderful. But one man, the guardian Knight Khan, raced across the Black Sea and was drenched in the blood and guts of black creatures. And this time he had a letter safely hidden in his breastplate. His New Year's mission was to deliver it. Shiren was reading Kashmir's letter. From it, he learned that Gina had chosen Tess. It was curious, but nothing more. Shiren was not interested in the phoenixes. The skill of the sword has grown greatly. It is growing stronger at an amazing rate. And that's all Kashmir has written about Jin's fencing. Shiren was disappointed. He allowed Jin to practice swordsmanship, magic, and shadow energy at the same time. But of course, as a Rankandel, he wanted his son to fence even better. He knew his son could balance it out on his own, but it got on his nerves. Shiren called Han over, as he knew Ron Aaron had a grandson, the sword master of the Bement Empire, the patriarch of the Aaron family and at one point the worst enemy of Shiren. However, the difference in their strength became apparent when Shiren reached the demigod realm. Even Ron's children were overwhelmed by Rankandel's children. In this situation, Ron's most talented child was born. Even though he was a child, he had already surpassed his generation by becoming the next patriarch. Khan said that a couple of days ago he received some information about him, just about the request of the space competition to remove the pirate participating in it. In the list of participants, Dante Aaron registered under a pseudonym. Space competition. It was organized by pirates. 10 years ago, Mary took second place and threw a tantrum. This was her first defeat. 2 months later, she took revenge. This is a secret that few family members knew about. Shiren told Han to send Jin there. Under the sight of many eyes, he will not be able to use magic and shadow energy. He would have to rely on the sword to win. The only times Jin can use his shadow energy and magic are when there are no witnesses or he can get rid of all the witnesses. Of course, he couldn't use all three of his strengths in that competition. He can enter as a mage and use only magic, or he can enter as a knight and use only fencing. Shiren wanted to stimulate Jin through Dante. Phoenix and magic were good and all that, but Shiren wanted Jin to prioritize the sword art. As a Rankandel, he needs to prove himself with a sword. Nevertheless, a 16-year-old boy spent most of his time fencing. This is enough to make Shiren's fears meaningless. After completing successive battles with Alika, he devoted all his energy to training. But he didn't feel impatient. Thanks to Alika, he learned a lot about himself. Kashmir pulled out a piece of paper and shook it in front of Jin. It was an application for participation in the space competition. As far as Jin knew, the space arena was just a playground for pirates. In fact, most of the competitors were from the second to the third rank. Kashmir said with a smile that Jin had been working hard lately, so he had prepared entertainment for him. According to the 7 colors, Dante from the Heron family will be there. Jin must have heard about his grandfather, the current head of the family, Ron Aaron. He was on an equal footing with Shiren before becoming the head, and Dante is his favorite grandson. Isn't Jin curious to know how strong he is? Jin thought about it and asked if he really needed to participate in this. Kashmir trembled and began to convince Jin. He said he needed to think about it properly. Dante was the next head of the Heron family. He won't get another chance to cross swords with him. Jin inclined his head and agreed. Since Kashmir insisted so much, he had no choice. Kashmir breathed a sigh of relief and said that Jin had made the right choice. Jin's suspicions were strengthened. It was clear to him now. His father wanted to talk to Kashmir face to face for a reason. Did Shiren order Kashmir to do something behind his back? Since he was being forced to fight against the grandson of the Aaron family, it meant that swordsmanship was a priority. Kashmir was bound hand and foot. He knew his father was interested in him and his progress, but he didn't think that was enough to force him to intervene. His brothers and sisters would go crazy if they found out. Kashmir told me that Jean needs to leave tomorrow. The deadlines were a bit compressed. Wishing a pleasant trip, Kashmir quickly left the training ground without looking back. The space arena was located on an island south of the Balado Empire. It was right outside the territory of Balado, so the surrounding ocean was a playground for pirates. Jin went to this island alone. If he brought someone with him, Jin would have an emotional attachment that could potentially drag him down. He knew what his father wanted to say. To cross swords with a competitor alone, using magic and shadow energy around a huge audience was madness. It was even more disgusting here than in Mamita. Space competition, simple rivalry, but no restrictions on weapons. There were no rules in the space arena, as one would expect from a fight organized by pirates, including murder. There were no other restrictions for special weapons and tools. It was a crazy competition, in which even an attempt was allowed before the fight. To think that the grandson of the head of the Heron family was going to show off in such a hole. Has their head gone mad? Well, it didn't matter. It wasn't a bad idea to get together with him in battle for once. Before his regression, before his expulsion from the family, the commoners always argued who was stronger, Dante or Veridin, because they had a lot in common. They were both above the 7th rank at an early age, were appointed as the next patriarch of their respective powerful family, and reached the 9th rank at the age of 30. Whenever they met each other, the press went crazy. Besides, they were the same age. At that time, they attracted more attention than the children of Rankandel. Big sister Luna didn't show up much, and big brother Joshua lagged behind them, not having enough talent. There was no other Rankandel in the 2nd generation who was stronger than Dante, except for Luna. Although there was no definitive proof that he was stronger than all the children of Rankandel, but the world thought so. So Jin didn't mind crossing swords with him. It will be a good experience. Not only Jin and Dante came to the arena of space, but also Veridin. He seemed to be cheerful, despite the stench that hurt his eyes. Veridin came here to have fun, so he didn't even try to hide. Jin reached the front desk. One table set up in front of the arena looked worse than a pigsty. He handed over the registration form that Kashmir filled out, which caused the registrar to open his eyes. His hair covered his big body, and tattoos crawled on his arms. The man told him to get out, because the set is already closed. It's even better if he just dies. Jin was sure that the set was open before sunset. The man said he was not in the mood to accept applications. Then the man formed a circle with his thumb and forefinger. It is clear that he wanted money. Jin knew that money problems could be solved by paying. However, he decided with additional interest to drive a little common sense into the guy. Jin sighed and clenched a few gold coins in his fists and slapped the man in the face. He threw some gold coins on the ground. The guy's expression brightened, and he nodded. Jin could only wonder at the strength of his strike, which could seriously injure a trained knight of the 4th rank. However, despite the fact that the guy took the blow, he immediately stood up and laughed at the sight of the money. He liked the Jin. The man quickly added him to the list. Jin was in the 13th group. He gave him a piece of paper and said that the guy inside would kindly accompany him. The man greeted him with love and passion at this competition. The man smiling with his gilded teeth was the host of the contest. It was the Pirate King Cosmos. The interior of the arena reflected the structure of the prison. There were long, dark corridors with separate rooms pressed against each other on both sides. However, instead of an ordinary door like the one used in an ordinary house, each room had a prison door. The only difference between this place and the prison was that the competitors could freely enter and leave the rooms. Besides, the guides, the subordinates of the Cosmos, were quite nice. The guide was reading the words on a piece of paper. It contained the fictitious surname of Jin and his band. According to his boss, Jin looked confident in himself, so he should assign someone decent to him. If he doesn't find anyone, he doesn't care, even if he feeds them to the sharks. The pirate sighed and glanced at Jin. There are a lot of young people this year. There was another little freak who beat up their captain. There was no need to ask who it was. There was not a single teenager on this crazy island, except for Dante Aaron. It's a pity that these two are not in the same group. It would be fun to watch them fight. Who knows, maybe they will meet in the final. The pirate could only wish good luck. By the way, you will need a lot of it. Having reached the 13th group, the pirate began to leave. They'll see each other again if Jin survives. Jin asked about his room. The pirate just snapped, saying he had no idea. The guy definitely thought that Jin would die immediately. However, he spoke in a mocking tone, so Jin just walked past him and started choosing a room. Looking around each room, walking slowly, he noticed that there was considerable variety inside the rooms. In one room, someone was sitting in a corner and muttering prayers. In another, someone was examining unidentified objects. Some competitors have already formed gangs and joked with each other. In some aspects, this place seemed more barbaric than Mammoth. Jin shrugged and chose a room. He wandered the corridors for 10 minutes, but there was not a single room that was cleaner or better. They were all old and dirty. In fact, there are not enough seats for all participants. It seems that 2 or 3 people in a room is the norm. It's quite obvious that they deliberately wanted to cram a few people in here. The space arena was a brawl in which killing was allowed even before the fight. The contest was more like a survival game than a normal brawl. Consequently, they purposefully pushed competitors into cramped rooms. They wanted them to fight in a confined space. And when someone participated in the competition, it was impossible to leave it. Space's henchmen guarded the entrance, as well as the rest of the competitors did not let them escape so easily. If someone had made an unsuccessful attempt to escape, the other participants would have turned the fugitive into dead meat before the guards had time to get to him. This was the very reason why Cosmos thought Jin would become shark food if he didn't survive, and the reason why the guide said Jin would die anyway. It was hard to expect a novice to survive in such a wild environment. They thought Jin's chances of death were high, even if he was a talented 4th-ranked knight. To survive in such a place, observation and experience were more important than pure combat power, and a pirate definitely has more of them than a young guy. In the middle of a long corridor, Jin pulled open the cell door. There was an annoying sound of metal grinding on concrete, and the 3 participants inside the cell stared at Jin. The 3 guys were about 30 years old. After seeing their attitude, Jin came to the conclusion that they were just some inappropriate gangsters. Jin put down his sword and took off his coat. He'll count to 3. Those who do not leave during this time, they can only blame themselves for this. He had no intention of sharing a room, not even in the slightest. If he leaves these people by his side, they can stab him in the back at any moment. The hooligans doubted their ears and blinked. 1, 2, 3. Soon, the first one flew out with a bang. Several blows sounded. The bandits didn't even have time to react to the quick attacks. Following the painful screams, loud applause came from the next room. Others started coming out of their cells to take a look at Jin. Clean room found. But the real battle has just begun. He was sure that others would attack him, so he drew his sword and left the cell. And his prediction was accurate. It didn't take long before a lot of people appeared in front of him, eager to take his apartment. Jin asked them if anyone would like to share this apartment with him. Everyone grinned and rushed at him. The massacre began. Bradamante cut through the flesh of these bandits like a red-hot knife through butter. Severed limbs flew into the air and the floor was flooded with blood. The air was filled with the sickening smell of blood and madness, even with the lawlessness reigning. This place is nothing compared to Mammoth. Looking at their red eyes, eager to kill him, Jin realized that he would do without sleep today. Soon Jin was reading books in a relaxed atmosphere. The pirate who brought him here came to him. He said it was a little annoying. The pirate asked if Jin planned to kill everyone before the start of the competition. The road to Jin was littered with fresh corpses. Jin closed the book and grinned. He would call it an aperitif before the main course. The pirate couldn't help but laugh. He initially thought that Jin was just an arrogant kid, but his captain was right about him. For a reason, he ordered Jin to be taken to decent guys. He informed Jin that the first and second groups would start soon. Most likely, Jin will fight with one of them, so he can take a look at their fights. The pirate decided to escort Jin there. As they approached the arena, the screams became clearer. After taking the seats for the audience, Jin silently stood up to see the huge crowd, not counting the participants. There were at least 1,000 spectators. For a moment, Jin was worried that someone might recognize his face, but he didn't think that someone who went to a banquet in Rankandel would come to such a dirty place. However, if he had known there would be so many people, he would have focused a little more on his disguise. He could hear the voices of the audience. They looked like nobles from the upper class of the Balado Empire who visited the arena every year. They said they had heard that a backup standard bearer from the Rankandel family had appeared here. Jin would never have thought to hear such rumors. He stealthily sat down next to the two nobles and overheard their conversation. One of them asked the other why one of the Rankandels would be here. The second replied that he had heard about it from Cosmo when they were drinking together with him. A strong guy got mixed up among the participants. If the rumors are true, he's from the Rankandel family. It could be Daytona, Hayton, or Jean Rankandel. If the latter, then it will fly away. They wanted to see him, because Jin had reached the 5th rank at such a young age. Jin was interested, so he listened attentively to the nobles discussing this new rumor. The fame and power of his family is really well known. His name has been mentioned many times in press releases, but they even know the names of the Tone Twins. The Tone Twins were going to be temporary flag bearers. Before Jin's regression, they began their adventures around 1796 or 1797. Thinking about the atmosphere and mood of the Cosmos Arena, as well as the fact that the twins were considered vile homicidal maniacs in his past life, Jin concluded that they could well have joined the arena. Of course, in this life, the Tone Twins have been mistreated by Jin since their youth. Compared to his previous life, they have become much softer. If the twins are here, then this is great for his case. He can bring them to his room and use them as guards. Getting them to do all the dirty work would be nice. After that, the nobles argued over which of the Rankandels took part in the competition. Not only that, but other nobles also started whispering about the same topic. Fireworks flew into the air, painting the sky with bright colors. When the explosions followed, the air around warmed up. Then a man appeared and walked to the middle of the arena, the Pirate King Cosmos. As soon as he appeared, the audience went crazy. Cosmos seemed to be very popular with the public. There were nobles around him who were shouting and applauding with excitement. It was strange to see how those people who looked down on ordinary people suddenly welcomed violators of the law. Such a crowd came to fill his pockets. What a waste. However, enough of the chatter, they started the battle. Pirates on the edge of the arena blew horns. The steel doors on both sides of the arena rose, and the rivals appeared. There were 14 people in each group, and since there were at least 13 groups, 182 applicants participated in this dirty competition. No other fighting competition has involved so many people. Cosmos represented the main characters of the first match. The first one to appear was the one who was in the quarterfinals, the cutie from the Sharks, Mentes. While the nobles were talking in amazement, Mentes entered the arena first. With a shriveled physique, he assumed an awkward pose with strange swords in his hands, a typical image of a pirate. His opponent was a newcomer who participated for the first time. What does the cute little face of the swordsman boy hide? The boy was introduced by Paul Mick. Paul Mick came out of the waiting room and the audience started chatting. Everyone was surprised to see the child. They had heard that there were a lot of young guys this time, but Mick's gender was too small. This Paul Mick didn't look like he was no more than 15. Jin was also surprised. The boy looked about 13 or 14. He would jump into the arena without hesitation. He couldn't just let the child die there. But Jin remembered the pirates' words that their captain had been hit by a boy. The next series of events was the most unexpected. After notifying about the start of the fight, Cosmos left the ring, and Mentes licked the blade of the sword, showing his tongue with many scars. A swing of the sword. It happened in an instant. Mentes' neck was cut. The audience could not determine exactly when the pirate's head fell off. It was obvious. The movement was so fast that Jin, who was about to reach the 6th rank, barely noticed what had happened. Even Mentes himself did not have time to realize that he was left without a head. It was a slash in the form of a crescent. He instantly closed the distance, and when he was only 5 steps away from the pirate, he chopped off his head with a sickle-shaped swing. There was no doubt that it was Dante. There was no one among the applicants except Dante Heron who could do it. The audience fell silent. Those who spoke a minute ago could not find the words now, and Cosmos slapped his forehead with displeasure. Shark show-offs were annoying. Cosmos announced the winner, but the audience was silent. While everyone was in shock, the guy in the VIP seats on top of Jin stood up and started applauding. He said he would put all the money on it, and surprisingly, it was someone Jin knew well. Jin's eyes widened and he had to confirm that the face he saw was Veridon's. The audience belatedly began to applaud. The people next to Veridon seemed to be infected by his enthusiasm. They said they would also bet on Paul Mick. Veridon said that Paul is the future. Even if they have to roll out all the savings, you need to bet immediately. Jin looked at Veridon, who was still clapping. Veridon probably came because he was on a mission. He also got on his nerves, as did Dante. He will definitely notice it, and if he finds out, he'll be a pain in the ass. His alarming predictions could not be wrong. And, unfortunately, it was at this moment that Veridon noticed Jin, who was staring at him intently. Veridon was waving madly at Jin. Of course, Jin ignored him and looked at Dante. Oddly enough, Dante turned his head and looked at Veridon. He had only seen Veridon once at the Zippel family banquet, and he had already greeted him so openly in an unfamiliar place. So he waved too, expressing joy. It gave Jin a headache. Cosmos wanted to hear what Paul Meek had to say. Dante was happy that he got rid of one of the villains of the world. He also expressed the hope that in the next life Mentes will not be a pirate. Although his appearance was similar to that of a child, his voice was comparatively lower, and at the same time he scolded the pirates in the Pirate Bay. The Cosmos laughed. He said that the boy had upset the people present here with his words. The Cosmos told him to try his best. The pirates will be happy to talk to him on the fists. Dante silently headed to the waiting room, and the Cosmos continued the battles. Jin watched the rest of the sparring sessions. But apart from Paul Mick, there was no one who would attract his attention. He was sure that this boy was Dante Heron. He looked young, but his swordsmanship spoke for itself, so there could be no mistake. But most importantly, will he be able to defeat Dante? Jin quickly came to the conclusion that the fight with Dante could be won. Using magic and shadow energy, you can win without any problems. Not so long ago, he defeated the former agent of the Special Affairs Department, Bement, even though she was retired. It's true that Dante was very talented, but Jin could definitely beat him. But if they fight only with swords, there is no certainty. His crescent-shaped strikes, agility, explosive power, and accuracy are extraordinary. Dante Heron definitely practiced more proficient swordsmanship. It was inevitable because he was 3 years older, so Jin had to analyze. Perhaps he can win if he collects all the methods of victory until he meets Dante in the arena. He was told that several groups would be held tomorrow. This meant that his turn would come in 4 days. Until then, he must survive these nights. Dante's tired face appeared. He hadn't slept for at least a couple of days and was severely exhausted. A couple of days before the space competition, Veridon was playing with the pendant in his hands. The elder shook his head disapprovingly, saying that it was not a toy. Even the deputy head resorts to it only when very necessary, so he should be careful. Veridon laughed. He felt more confident with him. He also asked why he was called. The elder had a headache. He couldn't figure out who Veridon had taken after at all. On the southern island of the Bellado Empire, a martial arts event is held year after year. Perhaps Veridon knew about it. Hearing this, Veridon shuddered and began to behave extremely suspiciously. The elder wanted to hit his bad head with his fist, and he was wondering where Veridon disappeared to every time. The old man sighed and said that Dante Heron, the temporary head of the Heron family, was participating there this time. The elder ordered him to go there to see how strong his future opponent was. He should take this chance to see everything in person. That's why he was here. Now he had some pocket money. But why the hell haven't we played a single normal match in the last 2 days? Veridin was dissatisfied and disappointed. It was interesting to watch Dante's skill, but all the others were deadheads not worth his attention. This year has been just awful. Where are all the cool guys? Looking at the non-tournament grid, he saw the name Jean Grey. He immediately realized that this was Jin's pseudonym. This meant that Jin was not just a spectator here. Veridin could not restrain his beating heart. He was delighted. Jean and Dante. Veridin considered them the only 2 rivals in the world and did not expect to meet them both here. Unfortunately, Jin didn't give a damn about Veridin. Jin flopped down wearily on the ground. There are 147 participants left. 35 died. 5 died in double matches, the rest outside the arena. The members from the other group would be attacking soon, so he couldn't weaken the defense by an inch. If he falls asleep, anything can happen. During his cadet years, Jin trained without proper sleep, but this is the first time he stays on his feet for 4 days. He heard footsteps in the hallway, which were getting louder. It can't be that it was just a passerby. It had to be the movement of a man who intended to kill him. They could have been looking for someone else, but Jin silently took Bradamante. The footsteps got closer, louder. They stopped in front of the room next to Jin's. One more step and it will be Jin's room. This man didn't even hide his presence. It looks like he was overconfident or went crazy because of lack of sleep. Jin stood up and stood in a crouch, gripping the sword tightly. As soon as the visitor entered his cell, Jin planned to strike immediately. A strong metallic stench emanated from the man outside. The smell of blood. And then Jin heard an unexpected voice. A hoarse voice asked him to stop. It was Dante. He asked him for a bed for the night. If Jin helps him, then Dante will repay the same. Dante has been watching Jin since yesterday. And I have to say that he is a real master of the sword. A dull sound. Dante fell asleep without finishing. Jin could only be surprised. It won't be a problem to slit Dante's throat while he's vulnerable. He fell fast asleep on the spot. Didn't the Aaron family train him to function without sleep? There was a strong smell of blood coming from Dante. It looks like they tried to suppress him with quantity. However, before his frustration receded, Jin heard the footsteps of people trying to sneak in and hide them. It was a gang that was waiting for Dante to be helpless. Leaving the next head of the Aaron family in debt to him would be quite nice. Jin covered Bradamante with an aura and prepared to fight the aggressors. Seeing that they did not hide their presence well, Jin realized that they were not trained killers. In addition, their breathing was hoarse, which showed their nervousness. They would still be able to handle Dante, who was exhausted, but they weren't enough to take care of Gina. Jin deliberately stomped to the door of the cell, and the killers stopped in place. Before his enemies could exchange signals, he cut down the nearest opponent. Didn't they hear the warning? Everyone who enters this room leaves it without a head. One of the killers asked him to wait. They knew him because Jin had killed his entire group. He asked him to calm down. They weren't here to attack him, but the killer was just stalling and giving the command to another. While Jin was listening to the other assassins, something shining at the edge of the corridor caught his attention. He heard the tension of the bowstring and soon realized that the flicker came from the light hitting the arrowhead. Shot. The crossbow bolt smeared with poison was safely caught by the genie. Since they've come this far, they can only leave over his dead body. Dante woke up 17 hours later, around lunchtime. And as soon as he woke up, Jin told about everything that had happened since he lost consciousness. He went on to talk about how much he had done to keep Dante alive, and how he had caught one guy and found out about One-Eyed Joe, as well as a gang of pirate gangsters. They planned to catch the guy from the Rankandels and get a ransom. Dante participated in this competition and in Jin's past life, and then he became a hostage of these guys. The Aaron family was able to get Dante back after giving them an unimaginable amount of money and solemnly vowed that they would not take revenge. Like the butterfly effect, the Aaron family faced internal problems and many consequences. Jin didn't know much about the backstory of this family's internal failures due to secrecy, but he knew that he had just changed history by simply saving Dante. Even if they were a famous family, if an important figure was caught, one would only agree to the demands of the kidnappers, especially when their next patriarch was a hostage. Of course, if it had been the Rankandel family, they would have simply ordered the pirates to kill the hostage and proceeded to massacre the kidnappers, their families, acquaintances, and even unrelated persons. Everyone will die. This was Rankandel's method. It is strikingly different from other large families. Hearing that Jin had saved him, Dante thanked him with a smile. When he heard that he was mistaken for one of the Rankandels, he laughed. Had he been mistaken for one of those impudent Rankandels? He let out a deep laugh and shook his head. Seeing Jin's soulless eyes, Dante continued, "Since Jin is his savior, he should explain. As they suspected, he is a nobleman. Even though he's not from Rankandel, it was a little awkward for him to tell Jin the name of his family. Therefore, he said that he was a nobleman from Bement." Dante thought that Jin's attitude would change if he revealed that he was from Heron, traveling under a pseudonym. Whenever his status was revealed, he often saw his friends suddenly acting like servants. Noticing Dante's intention, Jin cleared his throat and stifled a laugh. He just nodded. Dante thanked him for his understanding. He owed him. Dante didn't know how to repay Jin. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. If Jin's life is in danger, he will put his life on the line to protect him. Dante swore on his honor. Having said that, Dante's eyes filled with sincere gratitude. Jin felt good inside. He knew, of course, that he had successfully instilled in Dante a sense of duty. Jin fell asleep instantly, just like Dante in the morning. But before that he said to wake him up before the match of the 13th group, and looking at Jin, who was fast asleep, Dante thought to himself. Jin was cold on the outside, but he was fighting for him, a man he had never seen before. Looks like he's found a good friend. Jin's battles the next day were not much different from Dante's. His opponents were presented with pretentious names like the Demon King Heli or something. But it only took 7 seconds to kill them. The audience fell silent again, and Veridin cheered the crowd. Some assumed that Jin was stronger than Paul. Others believed that Jin was no match for the reserve standard bearer of the Rankandel family. Hearing such words, Paul couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. He certainly wasn't a Rankandel. Jin showed off his amazing sword skills, but the nobles in the hall were already convinced that Dante was the temporary standard bearer of the Rankandel family. For them, it was no longer just a rumor. More and more money was accumulating in Dante's pool, and few people put their money on Jin. Thanks to Jin, the other participants naturally became irrelevant. The finalists, winners and veterans of last year, who were supposed to lead the event, were not impressed. Most of the participants were murder lovers, but no matter how much they liked to kill, most of all they wanted money. Getting a part of the betting pool was much more important than the grand prize of 1,000 gold coins for the participant. They were unhappy about it. Because of these boys, it was really boring. The bearded veteran offered to unite and kill them. Although these guys are strong, but they were all young and inexperienced. The prize pool for the winner will increase as more bets are accumulated per person. Someone else's luck could only be a pain for veterans. At that moment, the man of the Pirate King of Space appeared. He told him to stop talking nonsense. They can't handle them. Jean Grey's nickname is the God of Death, and he didn't get it for his pretty eyes. Besides, Jean and Dante shared the same room. He warned them because they are quite popular. It will be a pity if they die before the match starts. After that, he left. Lindy hated to admit it, but he was right. They decided to retreat. This will be the best solution. Fortunately, they won't encounter any young monsters. The veterans were not eager to die in this hole. Since the mood of the veterans was so sour, the rest of the participants had to unite among themselves. Until the end of the qualifiers, they decided to kill each other less. This way they will be able to return next year and earn money. The veterans' plan was to manipulate the victory. They planned to have battles without killing each other. Thus, they could guarantee easy money by distributing bets. The guide passed all this information to the Cosmos. The Cosmos was somewhat displeased. Did they decide to do something like this behind his back? The guide asked what he would do. The competition will be boring. Viewers will also notice this. The Cosmos said it was for the best. To hell with the program. Once Jean Grey and Paul Meek reach the finals, then the cheaters and the rest will become victims of the kit. The Cosmos has ordered an increase in the dividend rate for everyone except this couple of children. They should raise the bet to a value at which the audience will not be able to sleep, eat, and shit if they do not bet. It will be a lightning transition from the winner's match to the final. Whatever the final result, they will earn a lot of money anyway. The remaining rounds of the preliminary games passed quickly. Despite the fact that everything was staged, the battles were not as bloody and brutal as last year. The veterans just broke a few bones and effortlessly ended their fights, causing angry shouts from the audience. It could be said that the fights were staged. However, despite this, no one left their seats. They knew that after all the boring battles, they would be able to see a duel between Jin and Dante. And every time Jean or Dante encountered people objectionable to space in the arena, the crowd seemed to go crazy. Although none of the audience's favorites did anything special, the crowd went crazy. These two didn't even need to brutally kill their opponents. The two guys ended their battles with 1 or 2 swings of the sword. All their fights from the preliminary rounds to the semifinals easily ended like this. And finally, the finale. The whole audience was waiting for their appearance. Veridin went out to look, not closing his eyes because of anxiety. One became a shocking supernova from the first match, and the other was the God of Death, who reeked of blood even before the start. Veridin asked his bodyguards who they would bet on. They called the name Paul Meek without hesitation. It seemed to them that Paul Meek's sword skill was more refined. The bodyguards asked who he was betting on. Veridin grinned. He put 100,000 zlotys on Jean Grey. The bodyguards doubted that the pirates would be able to pay 300,000 gold if Jean Grey won. Veridin was sure that the Cosmos had money. The Pirate King has a couple of islands, so if he sells them, he can pay him back. The Cosmos came to the middle of the arena. Cosmos bowed to the audience. Many were delighted to see how he introduced himself. There were also those who scolded him. The audience threw mugs and vegetables at him. The Cosmos felt only disappointment. Usually the audience showered him with applause and flowers for hosting such a great show. He could only curse them in his mind. Cosmos has decided to double the entry fee next year. Cosmos stood up, hiding his displeasure. He suggested skipping the empty chatter and calling the heroes of today. Dante was more popular than Jean. It was inevitable, as the audience thought he was a Rankandel. When Dante entered the arena, many shouted to him with all their hearts. When Jin entered the stadium, the applause became much quieter. Instead, there were many who folded their hands on their foreheads, praying for the desired outcome. They were gamblers who saw a threefold gambling multiplier and used all their savings for betting. Despite their incorrect prediction that Dante would be the temporary standard bearer of the Rankandels, people definitely thought that he would defeat Jin. So far, Dante has handled his sword and crescent freely and skillfully, but Jin has not. So, the people who were betting on Jin were praying for his victory. Veridin stood up and shouted in support of Jin with bloodshot eyes. The other spectators who had placed a bet on Jin also started shouting. Of course, Jin didn't even look at them and walked over to his side of the arena. He felt considerable pressure, not because of the players who had put the unbelievable on the line, but because he wasn't sure if he could actually beat Dante. Jean Rankandel and Dante Heron. The two looked at each other with a calm expression. Unlike their other fights, they deliberately left 30 paces apart. One more step will be within the reach of the attack. They stood motionless, but the crushing tension suffocated both rivals. Jin couldn't make the first move as usual. Even without clashing swords, he knew that Dante's swordsmanship was better than his. He had felt it ever since he first saw Dante's fights. As for Dante, he couldn't hit first either, but not because he thought Jin was better. Jin's eyes darted left and right. Then when he focused his attention back on the middle, Dante was gone, and the familiar sound of a sword flying through the air reached his ear. Surprised, Jin picked up Bradamante, and Dante flew to Jin with a smile. The blow that passed through the hilt of the sword was incredible, as if there was an explosion inside the sword. There was an energy as sharp as split obsidian in the heavy blow. If Jin didn't have at least a little less strength in his hips and lower body, his stance would immediately collapse. He breathed a sigh of relief. Then he calmly took a step to the left to step away from Dante. Dante smiled. He knew this trick wouldn't work on Gina. As Jin prepared to swing his sword, Dante's blade began to be covered with a more powerful aura. Jin also didn't stand still and covered the sword with his aura. Every time their blades met, the sounds of an explosion echoed. Instead of two sharp guns, it sounded like two pieces of steel hitting each other. Jin was certain of something after parrying the blow a few times. Dante's first attack was the fastest, and now he retains stamina and increases speed only when necessary. Jin decided to keep up Dante's pace. Compliments were distributed in all halls. They all expected a big battle between them, but they didn't think it would be so interesting. Veridin ignored his sweaty hands and clutched his clothes. At first, Jin looked like he was cornered, but with every second he was catching up with Dante's pace. When they had about 20 hits in a fight, they looked equal. Jin's plan to destroy Dante was simple. He will take advantage of the only trait in which he has an advantage over Dante: endurance. Dante's body didn't complement his skill, and that was a weakness. He was 19, but he looked 13 or 14. He had a very petite build, which made it hard to believe that he was 19. He could increase his power and strength by using aura, but the change in stamina was beyond his capabilities. If his stamina was as great as his swordsmanship, then he would never have asked Jin for help. On the other hand, Jin was blessed with the famous physique of the Rankandel clan. His physical strength, stamina, recovery speed, and agility surpassed most, if not all people. He could have survived the nights in the arena without Dante. But this could not be said about Dante. Dante's stamina was incomparable to Jin's, although he always tried to overcome his weakness by bleeding and sweating. He has done an incredible amount of training. That's why it was hard for Dante to figure it out. But he still lacked one important trait compared to the 16-year-old guy in front of him. It's a talent. Dante sped up. Due to the surprise, Jin received a wound. Jin shouldn't let him make a few shallow cuts on him. The problem was the need to dodge every fatal blow. Because the pace was faster, Dante's stamina was drained faster. However, as Jin received more shallow wounds, he also gradually became exhausted. The loss of blood meant that he was also losing stamina. Conversely, he should not give him a single scratch until he gets tired. However, with the hope of winning, Jin gritted his teeth and continued to dodge. As long as he maintained this speed and parried at the last moment, Jin would be able to continue the fight for at least an hour. Dante wasn't an idiot. Although it seemed like Jin was losing and Dante was carefree, he couldn't forget about Jin's plan in any way. Eventually, he would find a way to replay young Rankandel's defense plan. Dodging attacks was crucial. Another cut on the shoulder, And while dodging the barrage of blows, Jin got a cut on his arm, almost releasing the sword. All the spectators who had put their money on Dante started shouting. In their eyes, Jin looked like he was being beaten without a chance, so they thought the battle would end soon. However, Dante finally understood. Jin knows that he has more stamina than him, so he drags out the battle. And finally, Dante realized Jin was using a pseudonym. Jin Rankandel. If he were a Rankandel, he would have incredible stamina that Dante didn't know about. Apart from the cuts on his hip, shoulder and arm, if Jin had a normal body, he should have lost consciousness during the shock wave from the clash of swords. But if endurance is all Jin has, then he made a mistake. Dante decided to end the fight with one punch. Jin glanced at Dante, who quickly jumped away from him. What was that feeling? Dante's instincts told him that a careless attack was dangerous. Dante couldn't understand that what he felt was related to Jin's two suppressed abilities, shadow energy and magic. If Jin had used these abilities, Dante wouldn't even have had a chance. It was an innate terror that came from a stronger opponent. If he had attacked, he would have been flattened. Jin was finally able to catch his breath. Jin almost summoned the energy of the shadows. He was well so battered. He took off his coat and threw it away. Now it was Jin's turn to attack. Jin swung Bradamante with all his might and launched an attack. Dante's position faltered, prompting him to retreat. Jin only made one move in each attack. He practiced it 10,000 times with maximum effort every day, a blow that he could reproduce 3,000 times. Dante concluded that these were not easy blows. All of Jin's attacks had the same power as the first swing. Jin made the same vertical swing, and Dante couldn't easily get away from him. Every time Bradamante fell on him, it felt like a massive wall was pressing down on him. He had neither the time nor the energy to change his position. At this rate, in a few minutes Dante would have suffered an annoying defeat from the same blow. Therefore, he had to make a decision. Should he have given his all from the very beginning? Should he use the family's secret technique? However, he was faced with a dilemma. Dante didn't want to kill him. If he had used his secret technique, Jin would certainly have died. This prevented him from using it. Although they had only met a few days ago, Jin was a very important person to him. The savior, a worthy opponent, the mountain that the Heron family must overcome. The youngest son of the Rankandel family. Friend, Dante made a contradictory expression, sorting out his thoughts, and Jin knew exactly what he was feeling. The genie hit the ground. He looked into Dante's eyes before speaking. He's Jin Rankandel. He told Dante not to embarrass this fight. The two stopped moving, but the audience continued to shout. Despite the fact that the reception has been closed for a long time, with the hope of their bets, people have contributed to the loud noise. Jin's words were suppressed by the wild crowd, and they just stood and watched. Hearing these words, Dante was confused. In any situation, failure to harm the enemy meant the defeat of the warrior. It was shameful in front of the enemy and even more disrespectful in front of a worthy opponent. Is there anything more shameful than condescension from an opponent you value? The problem wasn't whether to use his secret technique. The question is whether he will try his best without hesitation. Ending the battle without it would be meaningless, regardless of whether he won or lost. Dante apologized for not showing his best side. Dante pointed his sword at Jin, intending to strike with the sword to show respect. Jin slammed his sword into Dante's sword, making a soft musical sound of metal hitting metal. And at that moment, they experienced a strange feeling. The screams became fainter, like an echo traveling in a canyon. Their surroundings blurred and gradually became dark. In their world, they were just the two of them, standing in front of each other. They both believed that either of them would make an exciting fight. They didn't need to talk to share this feeling. It was a common hallucination that sword masters fall into when fighting their opponent. They both took a deep breath at the same time. It was hard to tell who struck first when they clashed swords. Unlike their reverent tapping of swords at the beginning, the blows of the blades caused blinding sparks, sounds like explosions, screeching metal friction and echoing wind, aura flickers everywhere, as if his exhaustion was a lie. Dante swung his sword more vigorously than before. Jin also channeled the remaining energy into his attacks. From the blows, blood and sand splattered all over the arena. At the moment when they were supposed to applaud, the crowd fell silent from shock. In their eyes, the two teenagers fighting looked like giants, and they did not dare to blink so as not to miss the moment of the fight. It's been 10 years since the arena opened, but they've never had a moment like this. The spectators who had originally come to watch the brutal slaughter were now blessed with the spectacle. They witnessed a duel between two talented knights. At this point, the gambling aspect of the arena became irrelevant. Of course, when the battle is over, someone will laugh and someone will cry. However, at this moment, everyone was startled by the fight. Dante had to reach his limit. So why has he held on until now? Dante Heron, a genius that manifests itself once in several centuries. He was a talent blessed by the gods. However, Dante was born with a fragile and weak body, which turned out to be an unsuitable vessel for such strength. How much effort did this short boy who was born with below-average physical data, put into training. How many times did he kneel in despair before overcoming his fatal flaw? Those who trained until death could notice the amount of effort of others. As for Jin in his past life, he remembered the seemingly eternal hell when he could not overcome the wall of the first rank, despite the fact that he had the blessed body of the Rankandels. So he could easily imagine Dante's past. He curled up in a ball in the dark training room, anxiously looking at his small and fragile body in the mirror, the one who trained and whipped himself until he was on the verge of death and exhaustion. And in all these moments, he never let go of his sword. So was his own past life. However, unlike Jin's past, Dante persisted in any difficulties. Dante's hoarse voice was born out of all the screams he made to overcome his problems. Dante began to tremble, from wandering through hopelessness to becoming the presumptive successor of the Aaron family and the motivation to try your best after every tiring day, simply because he was one with his sword. Otherwise, even if he was a noble in the empire, life would just be a boring theatrical production. Dante was like that. Jean Rankandel, the 13th young lord of Rankandel. As each stroke of the blade vibrated through his entire body, Dante thought of Gina. I came to everything ready. The bloodline of every knight's dream. A solid body descended from a blessed bloodline. Jin, who became a knight of the 5th rank at the age of 15. Now he was 16 and he could meet Dante face to face. The most talented among the talented. Why then did he feel despair from him? Despite the fact that Jin was born in a world that is considered a paradise for knights, he behaved as if he was watching this heavenly world from afar. So why is he so desperate? Why, despite the fact that he was born with everything, there are such emotions in his blade? Isn't it because the youngest son is far from being the heir to the throne? No, he's like an unearthly being. He doesn't need to mess with the hierarchy. Is it just to become the best in the world? Or is it because he has lived many days in hopelessness and despair? Did he mean to say that he had more days of suffering? Dante couldn't even remember how long he had endured to be where he was now. How much did he sink into despair? How many times have you been depressed? How many times have you pulled yourself together? I can't count it. As he applied force to the hilt of his sword, Dante felt cracks creep across the bones of his arms. Excruciating pain shot through his body, but he didn't flinch. Every time he swung his sword, his bones suffered from new cracks, but his movements did not change at all. Although his stance began to fall apart, Dante did not neglect his weak body. While Jin could feel the sword closer than his skin, he could feel Dante's exhaustion through every clash of their swords. As soon as he realized that his victory was close, Jin felt more anger than joy. Dante's body was collapsing. Now it's Jin's turn to decide. Kill him or not. He didn't need to think long. To withdraw the sword would be an insult to Dante. Jin made a horizontal swing. Dante deflected the blow, but his body trembled, barely able to keep his balance. Dante felt other bones breaking in his body before he could turn his head and follow Jin's movements. Bradamante had already struck a second blow. Fortunately, the blade hesitated. Jin stopped his sword inches from Dante's throat. In fact, Dante had already passed out before Jin's second attack. Dante fell to the dirty floor. Jin blinked quickly and sighed heavily, looking down at him. Time seemed to stop in the silence that followed. At the moment when he tried to call a doctor or anyone who could treat Dante, one of the spectators jumped out of the spectator area into the arena. Veridin knelt beside Dante and cast a spell. Baradin consecutively cast 3 healing spells, demonstrating his insane talent for magic. However, at this very moment, only Dante was bothering Jin. Veridin's expression didn't look important when he chanted the spell. Less than 10 seconds had passed, and his entire body was wet with sweat. Jin wondered how much mana he had channeled. Despite the fact that he used a spell that could instantly heal a fatal wound, Dante's eyes did not open. It was too late. The line has been passed when it was possible to cure with one magic. Dante's insides were a mess. Not a single bone was intact. In fact, his broken body was burning with an aura. The magic of recovery in this state will only increase the pain. There was only one way to keep Dante alive. Veridin told Jin to listen carefully. What's going to happen now has to stay between them. As soon as they saw the object that Veridin showed, the guards' faces turned white with fear. They began to dissuade him. Young Zippel ordered them to cover them with cloaks. The guards bit their lips and surrounded Veridin, Jin and Dante with their cloaks. The crowd began to chatter, whispering among themselves because of the sudden turn of events. No one hated Veridin's actions after seeing the Zippel insignia on the guards' cloaks. As soon as the Zippel coat of arms was revealed, everyone, including the pirates, became quiet and calm as a flock of sheep. Even the host, Cosmos, did not dare to enter the ring to interfere with the current state of affairs. Did they come to kill Paul, knowing that he was a Rankandel? If they get into this, they will surely die. The Cosmos shouted for everyone to close their eyes and ears. It was a very ridiculous situation, but the audience really listened to his orders. Not a single person smiled or laughed. The Zippel family was not a force they wanted to face. Veridin grinned. Space caught the atmosphere. Veridin pulled out some kind of gem. At first glance, it was a spherical ruby. However, upon closer inspection, it had a much deeper shade of red, as if it was blood pressed together, and they discovered an unspeakably strange energy in him. Jin had seen it before, but he couldn't remember exactly what it was. It wasn't what he saw physically, but what he saw through a textbook when he was a student. Veridin said it was numerous blood. The moment Veridin called his name, Jin's jaw dropped. The god of hope, who disappeared due to several incidents before the emergence of the holy state of Vankala. All that was left before the disappearance were 8 tears and 100 drops of blood, and people waged a bloodbath to collect these artifacts. The tear of Numerous was an object that could resurrect the dead. On the other hand, it is impossible to resurrect the dead with the help of the blood of Numerous. However, she could easily heal any injury or illness. 70 drops of blood have been used so far. At first it was the most wanted artifact, but as it became rarer and rarer, its existence became a myth. And one of these mythical objects shone in front of him.